The sun poured down on the gleaming glass facade of the SpaceX headquarters, where hundreds of reporters had gathered for the historic announcement. The flags fluttered in the breeze, and the world watched live as Elon Musk, dressed in a simple black suit, stepped up to the podium. The air was electric. Everyone knew this was more than another press conference. It was history in the making. The first privately funded crewed mission beyond Earth's orbit had been assembled, and today the world would finally meet them. Standing tall behind Musk were 5 individuals, each a masterpiece of human achievement: elite pilots, engineers, and scientists, hand-picked for this unprecedented voyage. But among them, one figure stood out: Dr. Naomi Carter, a woman of powerful presence. Naomi had smooth, dark skin that glowed under the flash of cameras, and eyes that spoke of resilience forged through hardship. She wore her SpaceX jumpsuit with effortless grace, her name stitched neatly over her heart. For Naomi, reaching this point had been a lifetime in the making. Born in a rough neighborhood in Chicago, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, Naomi had clawed her way through every obstacle society placed in her path. Top of her class at MIT, decorated Air Force pilot. There was no challenge she hadn't faced, no limit she hadn't broken. As Musk detailed the mission plans, the crowd burst into cheers. Headlines blazed across the internet: "Diversity among the stars. SpaceX selects first black female pilot for historic mission." But not all the headlines were positive. In the dark corners of political forums and whispered conversations in Washington, anger and resentment began to brew. In particular, one voice, louder than all others, began to stir, a voice that would soon ignite a controversy no one could have anticipated. The announcement hadn't even cooled when the first tremors of controversy began to ripple across the country. In the shadowed halls of political power, some watched the celebration with narrowed eyes. Among them sat President Donald Trump. Watching from the comfort of his private estate, Trump's face remained stoic as the news anchor gleefully highlighted Dr. Naomi Carter's selection. The anchor praised her background, her achievements, her historic role. Trump leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. To him, it wasn't a triumph of merit. It was a carefully staged performance, a political move disguised as progress. Later that evening, Trump took to social media. "Choosing people based on wokeness instead of talent will destroy our country, and maybe even our missions to space. Space exploration should be about strength and intelligence, not about ticking diversity boxes." The post exploded like a grenade. Supporters rallied behind him, shouting that the mission was a sham, a PR stunt designed to appease certain agendas. News outlets polarized instantly. Cable shows debated Naomi's qualifications. Conspiracy theories took root like wildfire. The truth, that Naomi was perhaps the most overqualified candidate ever considered for such a mission, was buried under the noise. In a single night, what should have been humanity's proudest moment became a battlefield. And standing unknowingly at the center of the firestorm was Naomi herself. The morning after the firestorm broke loose, Naomi sat quietly at her modest kitchen table, the news buzzing on the small TV in the corner. Her coffee sat untouched. The headlines flashed bold and loud. Controversy over SpaceX crew selection. Was race a fact? Trump slammed space mission diversity. But Naomi didn't react. She simply watched, her face composed, her eyes steady, the same eyes that had weathered years of doubt, suspicion, and struggle. She had faced work. She remembered her Air Force Academy days, where instructors doubted her every maneuver. She remembered being overlooked for missions, promotions, opportunities, despite outperforming nearly all her peers. Each time she met prejudice with patience. Each time she let her excellence speak louder than their doubts. This time would be no different. As the news cycle spiraled, Naomi did what she always did. She went back to work. She spent her days in the simulator, mastering the spacecraft's control. She spent her nights memorizing flight protocols, troubleshooting procedures, emergency drills. While the world shouted over her, she sharpened herself into a weapon no one could deny. Meanwhile, SpaceX stood by her firmly, with Elon Musk himself tweeting, "We choose the best. Period. Naomi Carter is the best. End of story." But the storm outside only grew stronger. It wasn't just about Naomi anymore. It was about who America wanted to be, and some people weren't ready for the answer. Behind the scenes, forces were already gathering to sabotage everything. In the polished halls of Washington, D.C., far from the roar of cameras and flashing headlines, secret meetings were already underway. A group of powerful individuals, politicians, businessmen, even media executives, gathered in a shadowy, wood-paneled conference room. They weren't concerned with truth, they were concerned with control. President Trump sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as advisors murmured around him. This wasn't about one woman. Not really. It was about narrative. It was about making sure the world still looked the way they wanted it to. Familiar, predictable, safe. One advisor leaned in. "Sir, if we can discredit her before the launch, we can discredit the whole mission." Trump nodded slowly. "Find something, anything. If she looks weak, the whole thing falls apart." Within hours, operatives were digging through Naomi's past, her finances, her education, her military service. Every file was opened, every interview scrutinized. They weren't looking for truth, they were looking for a crack they could smash into a canyon. Meanwhile, talk show hosts fanned the flames, speculating without evidence, painting Naomi not as a pioneer but as a symbol of misplaced priorities. The mission date loomed closer. Inside SpaceX, tension gripped the crew. Murmurs of doubt seeped in. Would the launch even happen? In the heart of it all, Naomi Carter trained harder than ever. She didn't need a headline to tell her who she was, but even she couldn't predict how far her enemies were willing to go, or how deep the betrayal would strike. The days leading up to the launch felt heavier with each sunrise. What was once excitement in the halls of SpaceX had been replaced by cautious glances, whispered conversations, and quiet tension. Inside the crew's private training facility, Naomi could feel it. It wasn't in the orders or the schedules, those remained professional. It was in the silences, the way conversations would trail off when she entered a room, the way some of her fellow crew members smiled a little too tightly, avoided meeting her eye. One evening, as Naomi sat alone at the edge of the training pool, running mental simulations, a fellow astronaut, Michael Harris, approached, hesitant. "Hey, Naomi, you doing okay?" There was something in his voice, not concern, something else. Naomi looked up, giving him the smallest of smiles. "I'm fine, just focused." Michael shifted awkwardly. "You know, there's a lot of noise out there. People saying crazy things about why you're really here." His words hung heavy between them. Naomi held his gaze. "I'm here because I'm the best pilot for the job. Period." Her voice was calm but steel-edged. Michael nodded quickly, as if embarrassed. Yeah, of course. Just be careful. Not everyone wants you to succeed." As he walked away, Naomi stared out at the water, her reflection wavering under the fluorescent lights. She wasn't naive. She knew what they were saying, that she was chosen for optics, not ability, that she was a symbol, not a professional. But Naomi had spent her entire life proving that her worth was not up for debate. They could doubt her, they could whisper, but when the time came, the stars themselves would see the truth. And so would the world. It happened just 4 days before launch. In the dead of night, a file appeared on a fringe conspiracy website. Anonymous, unverified, but explosive. It claimed Naomi Carter had falsified part of her military service record, that her flight hours were exaggerated, that she had once been reprimanded for emotional instability under pressure. Within hours, the story had spread like a virus. Hashtags exploded. Media hosts asked loaded questions. Talk radio screamed for her removal, and the timing, too perfect to be coincident. Naomi sat in a windowless debriefing room, across from a pair of SpaceX executives and 2 NASA officials. They had the file printed out in front of them, thin and pathetic. A few grainy scans, heavily redacted. "We believe this is politically motivated," one of the executives said carefully. "But public perception matters, especially when funding and reputation are on the line." Naomi's fists clenched on her knees, her voice low and firm. "So, what exactly are you saying?" The NASA official looked uncomfortable. "We're saying we need to investigate, which may mean delaying your involvement in the mission until after launch." There it was. The sabotage, clean, polite, lethal. Naomi stood slowly, Her voice, when it came, was sharp and unwavering. "I've risked more for this country than most of the people tearing me down have ever even imagined. I earned this seat, and if you let them take it from me, you're not protecting the mission. You're destroying it." No one said a word as she walked out of the room. But what Naomi didn't know was that someone had been listening, and soon everything would change. That night, as Naomi sat alone in her quarters, the door buzzed. She considered ignoring it. The last thing she wanted was another awkward conversation, another look of forced sympathy. But something in the silence beyond the door made her rise. She opened it. Standing there was none other than Elon Musk himself. No cameras, no entourage. Just Elon, wearing a hoodie, jeans, and an unreadable expression. "Can I come in?" he asked simply. Wordlessly, Naomi stepped aside. For a moment, neither spoke. The room was heavy with tension. Finally, Elon looked at her, really looked, with something close to admiration in his eyes. "They want to break you," he said. "Not because you're weak, but because you scare them." Naomi stayed silent, her jaw tight. Elon continued, voice low and deliberate. "We checked everything. Twice. Those accusations, fabricated, planted, designed to crumble under real scrutiny." He tossed a thick folder onto her table. A full internal investigation report, exonerating her completely. "But," Elon said, his voice grim, "politics doesn't care about the truth. They want an excuse to pull you. They're pressuring us hard." Naomi folded her arms across her chest. "So what happens now?" A slow, almost dangerous smile crossed Elon's face. "Now, we launch anyway. And you're flying this mission." Naomi stared at him, disbelief flickering for a second, quickly replaced by fierce determination. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," Elon replied. "History's written by the ones who dare." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Get some rest, Naomi. You've got a universe to conquer." And just like that, the tide began to turn. With Elon's support now public, the energy shifted overnight. The headline on every major outlet read, "SpaceX stands by astronaut Naomi Carter." The full report clearing her name was released to the public. The smear campaign, shattered, and the people who pushed it, exposed. But the damage, though undone on paper, left cracks in the mission's armor. NASA issued a reserved statement. Politicians scrambled to reposition, and the media, once divided, began to rally around her, not just as an astronaut, but as a symbol. Back at the SpaceX command center, Naomi returned to training with new intensity. This time, the looks she received weren't filled with doubt. They were filled with quiet respect. Even Michael Harris, the crewmate who once questioned her, approached her after a long simulation run. "I was wrong," he said simply. "You earned this. All of it." Naomi didn't respond right away. She just offered him a firm nod and went back to work. Because for her, this wasn't vindication. It wasn't justice. It was simply survival. Another storm weathered. The launch was now less than 72 hours away. The rocket stood tall on the Cape Canaveral launch pad, gleaming under floodlight. Inside Mission Control, a technician ran through final checks. Outside, protesters and supporters stood on opposite sides of the street, waving signs, chanting slogans. The nation divided over one woman headed for the stars. But Naomi Carter, she wasn't watching the news. She wasn't scrolling the reactions. She sat alone in her crew quarters, staring out a small window at the rocket that would carry her beyond Earth. She whispered to herself, a quiet mantra, earn every second, because now the real mission was about to begin. The world held its breath. Cape Canaveral buzzed with activity as the sun began to rise, painting the Florida sky in hues of gold and crimson. The Falcon 9 stood ready, silent and still, its white frame gleaming against the morning light. Inside the crew capsule, Naomi sat strapped into her seat, helmet on, heart calm. Through her visor, she could see the instrument panels glowing softly, each light, each reading familiar. She had trained for this moment thousands of times, but this time it was real. T-minus 10 minutes to launch. The voice from Mission Control echoed through her headset. She glanced to her left. Michael Harris gave her a short nod. To her right, Commander Ortega tapped the screen with practiced ease. There was no more doubt now. Only purpose. Down below, the crowd stood in tense silence. Families, media, protesters, believers, even Elon Musk stood watching, arms crossed, jaw set. And in a government office far away, one particular man, a former president, stared at the live broadcast with tight lips and narrowed eyes. T-1 minute. Naomi took a deep breath. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a statement. To every girl told she wasn't enough. To every soldier passed over. To every voice silenced for daring to speak up. T-10, 9, 8. She closed her eyes. 7, 6, 5. The engines ignited. 4, 3, 2, 1. A violent rumble shook the ground as the rocket roared to life. Fire and smoke billowing beneath it. Liftoff. The capsule surged upward, cutting through the clouds, defying gravity. And with it, the weight of everything Naomi had ever fought against. In that moment, Earth fell away, and Naomi Carter. Weightlessness wrapped around Naomi like a second skin. The capsule floated effortlessly in Earth's orbit, the blue planet spinning below, vast, beautiful, and distant. Inside the capsule, everything seemed calm. Readings stable, systems nominal, but tension simmered beneath the surface. After a brief systems check, Commander Ortega unstrapped himself and drifted toward the center console. Mission Control is patching in a priority message, he said, voice tight. Naomi furrowed her brow. Priority messages in orbit were rare and almost never good. The screen flickered, and encrypted transmission blinked into existence. The words hit her like a punch. Security breach, compromised manifest, possible tampering pre-launch. Be alert. The crew exchanged stunned glances. Tampering, up here, now. Ortega's voice was grim. Secure comms only, full internal sweep. No outside transmission until we know more. The weight of the situation settled over Naomi. Someone had tried to sabotage this mission before it even left the ground. And now, drifting 250 miles above Earth, they might still be in danger. Naomi's mind raced. Who? Why? And was it connected to everything that had happened back on Earth? She reached for the comms panel, locking down external signals. No one spoke. Only the hum of the ventilation system filled the capsule, cold, mechanical, and oddly menacing. Outside, the stars glittered with deceptive calm. Inside, a storm was building. And this time, Naomi knew. The real fight wasn't gravity, it was survival. Inside the capsule, silence had never been so loud. The crew floated in uneasy stillness. No one said it aloud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. If there was tampering, was someone on board responsible? Commander Ortega initiated a manual system sweep. Michael Harris reviewed life support logs. Naomi focused on the flight control backups, but her mind was elsewhere. Something didn't add up. The timing of the smear campaign, the political pressure, and now a possible breach. After launch, this wasn't random. This was orchestrated, and whoever was behind it wasn't done yet. Suddenly, a low beep echoed from the navigation panel. Naomi floated over. Her eyes scanned the alert. A minuscule deviation in orbit drift trajectory. Barely detectable. She tapped the manual thruster override. No response. A chill ran through her. Commander, I've got a nav anomaly, she said, her voice calm but clipped. Ortega joined her, frowning. That's not atmospheric drag. That's correctional thrust being overridden. Michael's voice cut in from the rear module. Guys, one of the backup propellant valves just activated on its own. They all froze. 3 independent systems had reported changes. None of them authorized. Ortega's voice dropped to a whisper. We've got a back door in the software. Naomi clenched her fists. This ship is being remotely manipulated. In orbit. With no way to eject. No way to escape. And one terrifying possibility. Whoever had tried to stop her from launching had followed her into space. Commander Ortega immediately initiated emergency lockdown protocols. Shut down all external comms except for our hardline with mission control, he ordered. Naomi floated quickly to the backup systems panel, her heart hammering in her chest. They needed control fast. But as her fingers danced across the manual override, the screen flashed an ominous red message: access denied, remote command active. Naomi's stomach dropped. They were locked out from their own ship. Michael cursed under his breath. This is bad. Real bad. Naomi's mind raced, pulling from every emergency procedure she had ever drilled. Whoever had coded this backdoor wasn't some amateur hacker. This was professional, military-grade, strategic. She looked at Ortega, who met her gaze grimly. This isn't just sabotage, Naomi said quietly. This is a hijack. Down on Earth, inside mission control. Alarms began flashing across the board. The operators shouted across the room. Unauthorized orbital drift detected. Propellant reserves depleting on non-scheduled burns. Elon Musk himself rushed onto the floor, taking the headset from a stunned engineer. Patch me through now. Inside the capsule, Ortega's comm buzzed. Crew of Falcon 9, this is mission control. Confirm your ability to override. Ortega replied, voice clipped. Negative. Remote protocols are active. Local overrides locked out. A crackle of static. Then Musk's voice came through, low and deadly serious. Listen carefully. We are working on a shutdown code from here, but if the system is fully hijacked, your best shot is a manual reboot. You'll have to power cycle everything, including life support. It'll be risky. Naomi didn't hesitate. Tell us what to cut. We're not dying up here. For a moment, silence hung in the cabin. Then Musk's voice came back. Copy that. Stand by for hard reset instructions. And Naomi, she waited. You've got more people down here rooting for you than you know. Bring it home. Naomi's jaw tightened. Copy. Let's get our ship back. The capsule spun gently in orbit, drifting ever so slightly off course, a silent battlefield, where the next move would mean survival or oblivion. The plan was as dangerous as it was desperate. Shut down the entire system. All power. All oxygen, everything, and restart it manually, blind and in the dark. Commander Ortega floated near the master relay panel, his fingers trembling slightly as he unscrewed the final cover. Michael Harris clutched the manual restart schematics, his voice quiet but clear. Sequence must be exact. One wrong relay, and we fry the control core. Naomi took her place at the central processor. She looked to Ortega. He nodded. Ready. On your mark. Naomi reached for the primary shutdown switch. It was small, unassuming. A red toggle labeled simply Total System Kill. She flipped it. Everything went dark. The capsule became a tomb. No hum of machines, no lights, no airflow, just cold silence, and their breathing. Naomi reached for her emergency light. The red glow barely illuminated her hands. She moved quickly, counting seconds. Relay 1, engaged. Ortega called out. Relay 2, good. Michael confirmed. Going to bypass ignition inhibitors now. Naomi's hand trembled slightly as she connected the backup circuit. Nothing. Then, a flicker, a green light, then another. The capsule hummed. Lights returned in a slow cascade. The vents hissed softly. They were back online. Naomi exhaled long, sharp control, but just as relief began to settle, an alert blared. Integrity breach. Data link. To Earth compromised. Unautorized signal re-established. Naomi spun around. We just shut it down, how's it back? Michael's face turned pale. The virus wasn't just external. It's in the firmware. Ortega slammed a hand on the panel. Then this isn't over. Someone down there still has a line into our ship. Naomi's voice cut through. Then we cut them off. All of them. We fly this bird analog if we have to. The crew locked eyes. No more trusting systems. No more remote commands. From here on out, they'd fly on instinct, training and nothing else. And Naomi? She wasn't just flying to survive. She was flying to reclaim something that had nearly been stolen control. For the first time in decades, a spacecraft in low Earth orbit was flying fully manual. No autopilot, no external telemetry. Just a crew of 3, piloting through instinct, training, and raw determination. Commander Ortega adjusted the analog thrusters, guiding the capsule's path correction without digital input. Naomi sat beside him, recalculating orbital decay on a notepad, her fingers racing across the numbers. "We've got a narrow window in the next 45 minutes, she said. "If we miss it, we'll drift too far for re-entry without a burn we can't afford." Michael Harris tightened his grip on the stabilizer inputs. "We'll hit the window," Ortega said, voice like steel. "We have to." Down below, Mission Control could only watch. The link had been severed. The Falcon 9 was flying blind and sold. But as Elon Musk stood watching from behind the glass, he whispered, "Come on, Naomi, show them who you are." Back in the capsule, the orbit correction was underway, but the manual controls were sluggish. Thruster power was inconsistent, likely from the earlier override. The capsule shuddered, hard. Naomi gritted her teeth. "Main gyros are dragging. We're slipping sideways. If we don't balance it now, we'll roll into re-entry sideways." Ortega shouted, "Vents starboard. Now." Michael pulled the lever. A hiss of compressed air. The capsule steadied, barely. The G-forces began building early. Too early. They were coming in hot. Naomi glanced at the heat shield diagnostics. It was holding, for now, but they weren't out of danger. The window was shrinking. Their speed was rising, and there was no room left for air. "We've got one shot to angle this in," Ortega growled. "One burn. No reset." Naomi stared out the port window. The planet curved into view, breathtaking, infinite, and welcoming. She nodded once. "Then let's go home." The Falcon 9 tilted ever so slightly. Not from automation, not from remote command, but from Naomi's hand. Steady, sure. Below them, Earth rose like a silent promise. The capsule's exterior glowed, first amber, then burning white. The heat shield groaned under pressure. G-forces slammed into the crew. Commander Ortega gritted his teeth. "Brace. Now." Michael counted the seconds. Naomi closed her eyes for the first time, not in calculation but in trust. The re-entry burn had begun. The atmosphere howled outside like a wounded beast. Plasma fire licked the hull. The world blurred into streaks of red and gold beyond the tiny window. Inside, everything rattled. The thrusters screamed. Then, silence. No more shudder. No more fire. Just the hiss of cooling metal. And Earth. Blue. Calm. Real. Naomi leaned forward, breathing hard, a layer of sweat across her brow. "Chutes," Ortega whispered. "Come on, give us chutes." Then, a boom. A second. 3 white parachutes erupted above them, billowing like angels in the sky. The capsule jerked upward, slowing violently, then gliding. Below, the Pacific. Sunlight on waves, ships racing to intercept. Naomi laughed, not loudly, not joyfully, but with relief so deep, it cracked through the silence like thunder. They were alive. They had done the impossible, beaten the system, exposed the sabotage, reclaimed the mission. Naomi looked at her crewmates. "We didn't just come back from orbit," she said quietly. "We came back from being erased." Hours later, on the recovery ship deck, soaked and exhausted, Naomi stepped down onto metal. A sea of cameras flashed, but she ignored them, because in the back, waiting silently, stood Elon Musk. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just extended his hand. Naomi took it, firmly, proudly. No one could take this away from her now. The woman they tried to silence had touched the stars and returned louder than ever.